Hey guys, Rob here with 3D Printscape. After we upgraded to the SKR Mini, or the silent board in general, that helped a lot as far as noise goes. Right now, the loudest part left is going to be the fan coming off of the power supply. So today we're going to do something about that. I printed a new cover that's going to go on the side. I grabbed a 80mm silent fan and then a buck converter. So we're going to go through the install process. I'm going to get a decibel reading before we start and then one at the end just to show what type of a difference it actually makes, and then we'll walk through the entire process. If you have any questions or have any feedback, go ahead and leave a comment below or join us on Discord. And if you guys haven't already, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Alright, so let's go and get started. First thing we're going to do is go ahead and power on the printer and get a reading for the current fan, so just so we have a starting point. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so the power supply fan is currently running. We're going to get a reading off of it. Alright, so if we look here, during that, the loudest it got to was 61 decibels at about 1.5 feet away. So now we're going to go through swapping out to the silent fan and see what it gets with that. Alright, the first thing we're going to have to do is take the power supply off of the printer. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. We just got to remove these two screws here. And then also, just to make a note here, that if you're working with any electrical equipment like this, make sure you're comfortable doing it. And also wanted to make a note that opening this technically does void the warranty on the power supply, but I haven't had any issues in the past, so. Alright, once the screws are out, go ahead and set those off to the side. And then we've got to just detach this cable here. Then we can kind of push the printer off to the side for now. So now we're going to take off these 3 screws here so we can slide this cover off. Alright, with those out of the way, we just slide this down. And we can kind of just leave it attached like that, just off to the side. Main thing is we needed to be able to lift up this top piece here. So that had to be out of the way to do that. Alright, now we got to remove the screws around the side that's holding in this top cover. So I'm going to go ahead and do that really quick. Alright, now with that, we can actually see the fan that is here and how it's connected. So I'm just going to snap a picture just so that we have that for a backup in case I need to go back to it. So I'm going to slide this cover out of the way. Alright, and then I'm going to disconnect this. Alright, and that took a little bit longer than it should have, mainly because I just had this running to get that last reading, so I wanted to be extra careful. Alright, so now we can set this off to the side here. Now I'm gonna show you. Alright guys, so now I just want to test fit the cover that I printed. And this does fit good, it aligns well. I want to make a note that there is a difference between the power supply on the Ender 3 and the Ender 3 Pro, so I ended up having to reprint this. This one right here is for the Ender 3, this is for the Ender 3 Pro. And as you can see, the mounting is different on them. So I will link to both of those in the description, but make sure you print the right one based on what you're using. Alright, so this fit good. So now what I'm going to want to do is mount our fan. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that. Alright, so I got the fan here, and then I got the screws that came with the kit. We're going to use those to mount the fan. We want to have it so that the air direction is pushing the air into the power supply. If you look at the original one, you can see, maybe, right here where it's pushing the air in. So it's sucking the air from the outside, pushing it in, and then it's venting it back out on the bottom. So we're going to want to do the same thing here. And on this fan, you can see the airflow direction as well. So that's pushing down. This cover does not have the grill guard. You can print it with it. They're both in the same Thingiverse file, so you can just choose which one you like. I opted to go without the cover though. Alright, so now we got the fan mounted. Make sure you don't over tighten these, just make sure they're snug. And then I ran it so that the wire's coming around this way, because when we mount the buck converter, I'm going to mount it right here. Alright guys, one thing I did want to point out, even though I am using a buck converter because the power supply voltage is 24 and the fan is 12, the fan that comes with it is also 12 volts, but you're running it pretty high. So you could probably get away with not using the buck converter if you wanted. I know some people have, but I still put it on myself. So just keep that in mind. The choice is yours. Alright, so now we have a couple choices here. We have to wire the fan into the buck converter, and then we need to get this adapter off of here and wire the other side of it going back to the power supply. Choice number one would be to go ahead and just cut this about right here so that we can work with what's here. That's what I'm going to do, but choice number two would be to push in on these pins, pull this off, and then create a new, and connect it to a new wire that's going to run from the buck converter back there. Again, I'm going to go with just cutting this. It's easier, then I can always reattach it later if I ever wanted to. So I'm going to do that now. Oh, one more thing on the buck converter. I got the ones that have the terminals here where you can just connect the wires into them so you don't have to solder. They are a little bit more, probably double the cost of the standard one, but we're talking like $1 difference. So to me, I felt it was cleaner to just go with ones with the terminals, and recommend that to you guys than recommending something that you guys have to solder in. But that is always an option. So here I'm going to cut this just so I have enough slack in case I ever need to reattach this. So probably about right here. Then I'm just going to set this back off to the side. And then I'm also going to trim down this tubing a little bit so that I can work with it and actually attach it where I need to. So maybe just 3/4 inch or an inch. Just like that. Now I'm going to strip these wires so I can put it into the terminal. Assuming those are about 20 gauge. And it's kind of hard to work with thinner wires like that with the strippers just because these only go up to 18 gauge. Alright, so now I'm going to twist these over and kind of fold them over one more time just so I have a good cable to work with. Just that, and like that. Alright, so next I'm going to go ahead and connect this to the buck converter. This is going to go into the in. And then if you pay attention here, you'll see positive here, negative on this side. So red is going to be positive, black is negative. So let me just go ahead and loosen this up. And sorry about the angle sometimes here, guys. It's hard to actually work on this while recording, and I wanted to actually have you see what I'm doing versus just show it when it's done. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten down the positive first. And then make sure my negative is in there good. And then tighten that down. Alright, now that that's nice and snug, we can go ahead and do the same for the fan. Again, we're going to have the same issue where we're going to have to cut into this. There are additional adapters that came with the fan. None of them are going to really help with what we're doing. Alright, so I'm just going to cut probably right here because I want enough space for it to come around like that. Actually, I'm going to cut as close to this front as I can. Alright, so I'm just going to go right here. Kind of cut that off. And then I took this off because I want to trim the sleeve down like I did on the last one so we have enough space to work. And also wanted to make a note here that we have 3 cables. We are not going to be using the yellow one. I guess technically this sleeve isn't really needed, it's just serving as an insulation. Now that's back in place, we're going to go ahead and strip the black and red wires. Same thing as before, we want enough space so we can kind of loop it over twice. Just be careful that when you're doing this, that you don't actually slice the wire. And then these are actually a little bit too long, so I'm just going to trim them down a tad bit. Then I can just fold them over, and these are good to go. So now I'm going to go ahead and put these into the buck converter. Again, paying attention to input and output, and positive and negative. So here we have out positive. So this will plug in here. Alright, and then I'm just going to tuck this yellow wire back into the sleeve for now. Alright, now we're going to want to use some hot glue and glue this into place right here. So I'm going to go grab that and I'll be right back. Alright guys, so now I'm back. I got my hot glue done. I'm just going to put 2 little drops of hot glue here and then push the board onto it to hold it in place. And then I'm just putting a little bit of hot glue around it. The size of the board is kind of odd, so just putting the drops wasn't enough. Alright, now that that's done, I want to reconnect this back to the board. It's going to plug in just where it was before, and I'm going to set it up like this. Wire's not exactly very long. Now we're going to have to power this back on so that we can adjust the buck converter. Be careful because this is going to be open components, so you don't want to touch anything down here. We're just going to adjust this screw right here. So let me just make sure this works. Yep. And then I know some people also print a piece that goes on the outside that they put the buck converter through, so they don't have to do this. I don't think it's really necessary, but that's your call. Alright, so I'm going to have to flip this over so I can get the power to it, and then we can go from there. Again, don't touch anything besides what you're working with here. Alright, so I turned on the printer, heated up the temperatures kind of high, and just kind of let it go just to get our voltage so that I can make the needed adjustments. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to switch this over to output, and then we're going to adjust accordingly. Alright, so the input is around 12.6 to 13, and I reduced the output to about 11.5 to 12. Like I mentioned, you could probably get away with not using the buck converter if you have the Ender 3 Pro. If you have the Ender 3 Non-Pro, it's still 24 volts going to the fan, and you will need it. I would still recommend using the buck converter just to dial down the voltage a little bit, just so you don't accidentally fry the fan over time. It was a couple dollars more, and it is a simple install. So your choice there. All right, so now I'm going to finish putting this together, and then we'll get another reading and go from there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and disconnect power. And we're going to disconnect this from the printer again. And then we're just going to flip the case over and kind of just slide this into place. Now we're going to want to put the 4 screws back in. So it'll be 1, 2, and then 3, 4 on the other side. Alright, those are in place. Now we need to slide this back in place and then put the 3 screws that hold this together back in. Alright, next step is we're going to have to mount this back to the printer. So I'm going to go and pull that back over, and then we'll get that mounted. Alright, now that that's mounted again, we're going to connect our power supply back up just with that red and black cable here. And then we're going to turn it back on and get a new reading. Alright guys, the power supply fan is running now, so let's go and get a new reading. Max was 53, so that's a decent drop. I think we were at 61 before. Alright guys, so there you have it. That was the process to put the silent fan on the printer. Overall, pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Just requires a little bit of work around the open electric box or power supply. So if you're not comfortable with that, I would recommend skipping this and just getting the little cover that goes on the outside and kind of dispenses air a little bit. But overall, I think we got about a 9 decibel drop. I'll get the exact measurements and put it on the website when I do the written instructions. But that's pretty substantial. Basically, there was no audible difference going from when that power supply fan was on versus when it wasn't. So definitely a worthwhile upgrade. I think at this point, the Loudest fan is going to be the one on the hot end. So that I might end up swapping out at some point in the future. We'll see. But if you have any questions about the process or like to see anything else, go ahead and leave a comment below or join us on Discord. Thanks.